Congratulations, you've made it to session 5 out of 6 sessions. We've been having a great time, and I hope you've enjoyed this study on why, answering life's biggest questions. Tonight we're going to tackle why the conflict between science and the Bible. You know, some people find it easy to believe in God. Maybe they just learned about God from an early age, or it just is easy for them to believe that God is real. But others find it hard. It's a challenge to have faith. And one of the biggest reasons that some people have a hard time just accepting the reality of God is because of what they've learned in science classes. In fact, many people believe that science, particularly the theory of evolution, has disproved God. But has it? Tonight, we're going to tackle that question. Patrick Glenn is a man who authored a book entitled God, the Evidence. He reflected back on his days at Harvard University where he had done studies, where as part of that time he just had repudiated God and any concept of faith in God. But later in his life, as he began to examine the evidence, he began to question his earlier presuppositions. And he wrote these words: "Rapidly, a picture emerged of the universe entirely different from the one I had been living in. Gradually, I realized that in 20 years since I had opted for philosophical atheism, a vast systematic literature had emerged that not only cast deep doubt on, but also from any reasonable perspective, effectively refuted my atheistic outlook. I'm not claiming that reason can bring one to belief in God. What I'm saying is this: reason no longer stands in the way as it once clearly did." Now, I don't believe that reason ever stands in the way, but for Patrick Glenn and thousands of people like him, he sure believed that it did, at least until he took a closer look. Is there a conflict between science and the Bible? Now, I don't believe that you can prove God. I believe Patrick Glenn is right, that science or reason cannot on its own prove or disprove God. God can't be put in a test tube to be probed and experimented. However, current scientific research has opened new windows for faith. Now, I want you to consider two things about science in the Bible. The first thing I want you to think about is that modern science has confirmed that the universe had a beginning. Now, science hasn't always thought that. In fact, for a large part of the last century, scientists just believed the universe was eternal, and it was only later, as they began to measure specific data about energy and motion in the universe around us, that they came to the startling conclusion that the universe had a beginning. Now, you've heard of this as the Big Bang Theory. Now, a lot of people think the Big Bang Theory undermines the concept of a God who created the world. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. There were some startling discoveries that confirmed or corroborated the Big Bang Theory back in 1992, when the Cosmic Background Explorer discovered, and I quote, "stunning confirmation of the hot Big Bang creation event." Boy, that set off a flurry in the scientific community. Carlos Frank of Durham University said, "It's the most exciting thing that's happened in my lifetime." Stephen Hawking, a well-known skeptic, said, "It is the discovery of the century, if not of all time." George Smoot of California University said, "It's like looking at God. We found evidence for the birth of the universe." What all those scientists now accepted is that time as we know it, the universe as we know it, definitely had a beginning. Well, whether you realize it or not, that squares with what the Bible precisely says. The Bible says in Genesis 1:1, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And even modern scientists now agree that the universe did have a beginning. Now, what's interesting about Genesis 1:1 is that there are 5 categories of science: energy, time, motion, space, and matter, things that can be observed and measured. You know what? We have all 5 of those in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, we have time. God, we have energy. Created, we have motion. The heavens, we have space. And earth, we have matter. Isn't it interesting that the Bible in its first verse defines the parameters of modern scientific thought. You see, when you understand that the universe had a beginning, as modern science has confirmed, then ultimately there are only two possibilities. Either something came from nothing, or something came from something else. It's the only two possibilities. It had a beginning. Well, it either began out of nothing, or it began out of something else. And if it began out of something else, then the something else could be God. And if you say it began out of nothing, that's an irrational statement. Psalm 19, 1 and 2 says this: "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, and night after night they display knowledge." That verse says the more we study about the universe around us, the more it will confirm the greatness of God. Scientists who understand the universe had a beginning are, at least many of them, willing to concede that that does allow for the possibility of God, and many of them believe it outright. John Polkinghorne, who is a colleague of Stephen Hawking and the president of Queen's College in Cambridge, said this: "A possible explanation," he's talking about the beginning of time, "a possible explanation of equal intellectual respectability, and to my mind greater elegance, would be that this one world is the way it is because of the creation of the will of a creator who purposes that it should be so." Now, the second thing I want you to consider is not just that modern science has confirmed that the universe had a beginning, but I want you to consider that evolutionary theory does not present an airtight case for the origin of life. Some would go further than that and say it doesn't present a case at all. In fact, most scientists willingly concede that evolutionary thought and theory cannot explain the origin of life. Now, let me say just a few things about evolutionary thought. There is a difference between, well, what some scholars call macroevolution and microevolution. Now, here's what I mean by that. Just about everybody believes there is some level of evolutionary occurrence in nature. That's called microevolution. That is, very few doubt that species adapt and change over time. And often some of the theories that we have for evolution are just examples of that. Moths change color, or animals adapt to their surrounding. No one really debates or is concerned about that. Macroevolution is the belief, though, that species change from one into another. It's not that species adapt. It's that ants turn into astronauts. It's that one species can evolve and become another species altogether. And that is where evolutionary theory really breaks down. Now, if you've believed all your life that every person who's smart and intelligent and well-educated just accepts Darwinian theory, I want to tell you that is not true. In fact, I went into my office just this morning and pulled down some books that I've read and some that I'm reading and some that I'm trying to read that just remind me some of the most brilliant minds in the world doubt Darwinian theory. In fact, let me just show you some of these that I pulled out of my office. Here's a book by Stephen Meyer.